Hey, everybody, welcome to the View from the Top podcast, where we help growth minded business owners and entrepreneurs get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own view from the top. I'm so glad you're listening in today. My name is Wally, and I've got Big A ready to bring the hammer down.
Come on, Wally. Come on. Wally, I almost had a wreck a while ago. Like I was coming back from the CPA and there's this long line of traffic and I'm still shaking a little bit. I got up there. There's this girl with the flag, you know, how they slow the traffic. They stop you and let the other people go. And I drove by this girl. She's on her Facebook. She's got her phone in her hand, like this with the right hand, left hand with the flag, and she's on Facebook. You can see her phone as I drive by. And she's not even paying attention to what she's doing. This girl's at work, and she's on Facebook on a 4-lane highway directing traffic. Now, if that's not an addiction problem, I don't know what is. What do you think about that? Like, would you have stopped and said something or like grabbed her phone from her? What would you have done?
So I'm a techno, like nerdy kind of geeky guy, right? When you say that, my mind initially goes to, is that the new radio? Like, is there another flag person down the road and they're communicating by their phones now?
No, this girl was on Facebook.
She was like by herself.
Yeah.
On the side of the road. I mean, not by herself, but there wasn't like an alternate flag
the other
person
end.
there.
Yeah, a mile away. Yeah, there's somebody else there. This girl's on her Facebook scrolling through. You know, it's like, oh my
how
gosh,
do you know? How do you know it was Facebook?
Kevin, have you ever seen the Facebook logo? Like, have you ever seen Facebook? Do you know what it looks like on your phone? She was holding your phone where you could see it when you were driving by. This girl's on Facebook.
You were close.
She was in the middle of the road. I mean, she had to stand there. They had the other lane blocked. Like, I started once to say,
I probably would have beat.
Follow Big A on Facebook. If you're on Facebook while you're there, subscribe to View from the Top podcast is what I wanted to say. All right, here's my point.
Hang on. I probably, in that case,
like I want to get her fired.
I've got all the information now. So you've established the fact that she's on Facebook for sure. There's no other, like, I'd probably have beat my horn. Or I probably would have done something. Like, I was just been frustrating. I'd be like, what is going on? For multiple reasons.
Yeah, I wanted to grab her phone. I wished I had grabbed her phone. I wish
reach out the window, just grab her phone and take off.
Yeah, just keep going. I was doing that. But, you know, maybe
like, Big A coming from cell number 9.
What should she be fired? Like, if I was her boss and like, is that acceptable? Everywhere I go, went in the gas station the other day to get gas and went and got coffee, and the guy's got headphones on. And he's on his phone scrolling through whatever he was doing. I have no idea what he was doing. I'm sure it was Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or, you know, whatever. But what are your thoughts about that? Like, if you're working for somebody else, like, should you be on social media? Is that like wrong?
I think with permission, it's okay. But I think without permission, technically, you know, unless you're on a break, I think you could call it stealing if you wanted to. That seems very conservative and bold thing to say, but
that's stealing for me. I've been an employer for 44 years. That's stealing from me. You're out in the middle of the road with a flag. You're supposed to be directing traffic and you're on Facebook. You're stealing.
Yeah.
100%.
Man, we've had a big pool project. We've had a lot of just project stuff going on around our house that we bought, just getting it the way we want it, you know?
Sure.
And I have been amazed. And I try not to judge too much because I feel like on one side of the coin, it's like, well, they get to choose and that's their life and that's what they choose. The other side of it is, man, I'm paying you to do some work out there. And obviously he's working for somebody else that I'm paying, but still, ultimately at the end of the day, it's on my dime. And there are numbers of times where they're on their phones. I'm not talking about taking work phone calls. Like, you can tell.
Sure.
I'm not talking about, you know, checking whatever they're checking.
TikTok, whatever, sharing videos.
Yeah, most everybody, I will say, most everyone that's been working at the house in different, whether it's pool stuff or building or landscape stuff, most of them have been really, really good. They've been really good workers. Yeah. There's been a couple, that I'm like, man, I have seen this most at like, I don't want to say fast food joints, but like jobs that I wouldn't want. Let's just put it that way. So if
Okay.
I'm sitting there as an attendant, attending something, whether it's a cash register,
Whatever.
whether it's a flag on the side of the road,
Yeah.
I can see the temptation to be like, oh man, I'm bored out of my stinking mind. Like I can see the temptation, but at the end of the day, unless I was given permission,
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah. I'm just old school, right? I'm old school, but like, hey man, when I'm paying you 40 hours, like we need 40 hours of work. Like you show up, it's not for your TikTok and growing your Instagram feed and getting on YouTube. Like find something, sweep, clean up, customer service, like do something.
Smile at customers.
Something, yeah, like speak. You ever thought about that? Like speak to the customer. All right, I better get off this because we're going to talk about a really important issue here in a minute. But I just had to get that off my chest because my heart is pounding, my blood pressure's up, and here we are doing an interview 5 minutes after this happened to me. So I thought it was a good time to get it off my chest. Maybe we shouldn't have hit record, but we did, and here we go. So
Here we go.
hey, I'm pretty excited to talk about relationships, long term relationships. It's something really near and dear to me.
Mhm.
And it is because my number one core values relationships matter most. And yeah, before we start, diving deep into this, like, what do you even think about when you think about long term relationships? Like, does an individual specific come to your mind? Is it just, over your ever how many years, 50 something years, it's like, do
Mhm.
you just think back of one or two people? Is it ever evolving? Like what comes to your mind when you think about relationships, long-term relationships?
Yeah, it took I, man, I struggle with having them. Um, we were in I was grew up in New York State till I was 18, went to college and got married and went back there for 5 years. Um, and didn't I had friends a little bit here and there, but man, it seemed like they were there 6 months, a year, and then, something happened and your life situation changed. It wasn't convenient anymore. And so therefore you just didn't make the time for each other. Was in Michigan for 22 years, 23 years.
That's a big
And
thing right there. Hold on. Do you hear what
yeah,
you just said?
I
Listen, when it's
know.
not convenient,
That's the
like you
truth. I'm
set
just telling you
aside,
what happened. I'm just telling you what happened.
okay,
I'm
but
not saying it's right.
yeah, everything in me flared up when you
I
said that.
bet.
It's
I
not
bet.
convenient to have these long-term relationships anymore. Like,
Yeah.
but the good ones, it's worth it.
Yeah. So we got to Michigan and there for 23 years or so. And I overthink things. So when I think of the word relationship and long term relationships, our definitions probably would differ a little bit there. Maybe not. But um, I had friends and I had maybe one or two. I would say that Pastor David Warren was one of my long term relationships
Okay.
from the church we were at. He was our age, and um, he just it was had just did things together. Our families did things together. He was they were connected to our children. It was just really it was a good relationship. And now I've moved away. As a matter of fact, I mean the reality is I've been gone. We left in July.
Mhm.
Um, I haven't texted him. He hasn't texted me. I haven't called him. He hasn't called me. He did send me a birthday card note, which was very nice on my birthday, but in a book, which was fantastic.
Well, let's go
But
back for a second.
we haven't kept that up.
You piqued my interest, and you said our definitions of long-term
Mhm.
friendship may be different. I'm sure that's the case for all the listeners out there today. What is your definition of a long-term relationship? Like what's got to happen for that to be labeled a long-term relationship?
I think that there's a canyon or maybe a ditch between how I would define it, and then probably if I'm truly transparent and honest about it, completely vulnerable, it's my hope. So definition to me would mean uh, it would mean some type of continual communication
Okay.
over, obviously long term relationships. I would say a period of time, and I think realistically that communication may change based on proximity because obviously if you go to church with somebody and
Sure, see them every
coffee
week.
shop, and if you're in there, if you know
Right,
if they're closer, then you'd expect that you'd just have more natural
right,
opportunities and
right.
whatnot. So I think there's a little bit of a variant there, but I just think that the relationships carry on over a long period of time, and it's almost like when you get together, it's like you're never apart. Like those,
Yeah,
that's I think of like a long term relationship.
yeah.
My hope, on the other hand, would be probably what most everybody hopes for is just a best buddy forever, all the time.
Right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's what we all, I think, at
Sure,
our
aspire
core
towards. Yeah,
hope for.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. But you can't build that kind of relationship. I'm not dogging on you, but you can't have that kind of relationship just when it's convenient.
I agree with you 100%.
You gotta dive in and you really gotta make the effort. When I didn't really understand what the value of long-term relationships were until 2001, and the reason I
Mhm.
know that specifically is because, I had that horrible automobile accident where I ran over and killed a pedestrian, and it was one of the darkest days of my life, and,
Mhm.
I'd had really good relationships up until that time, but man, that was at a time where I really needed people. And if I hadn't have been building these relationships over the course of my career, I wouldn't have had all those buddies that took off work and spent time with me and took me to lunch and took me to dinner and came to sit with me at my house and week after week, month after month after month, because that's a big ask for somebody to take that amount of time. But man, I couldn't get over that. Like I just couldn't get it out of my head that I had taken the life of another individual. Wasn't my fault, but nonetheless, it was somebody's husband, somebody's
Mhm.
dad, somebody's brother, and that guy's not coming home tonight. And man, these guys just spent countless dozens and dozens of hours with me. And I think, if I hadn't have invested the time in those relationships, that probably wouldn't have taken place. I probably would have been much longer getting over that. And it really dawned on me when these guys like Alan Lindsay and Greg Smith and Chris Freeman and people like that just took an inordinate amount of time to walk with me. And that's really the reason that I wanted to talk about relationships today is because we need people in our life that are going to come to us at a time when most of the time when we're in a bad spot. I think about major health issues that members of my families had over time. I think about relationship failures that there's been in our family. And I think about the trials that my adult daughters have gone through. And I think about many family members making horrible choices. And I'm like, man, if I didn't have good friends that had context for decades around my situation, they wouldn't be able to support me the way I needed it. And they wouldn't know how to aid me and help me and encourage me. And because we had those long term relationships, they were able to do that. They had history. And man, I am so on a quest to get people to understand the value of these long term relationships. And I'm teasing with you a little bit. I know I was dogging on you about it being convenient, but the truth is, I think that is the mindset of a lot of people today. I think it's like, hey, I'm busy, I'm trying to make money, and I'm raising my kids, and I've got these other responsibilities and obligations. But what I want to encourage you, the listener, to is that it's too late to build the relationship when you need it, right? We need to be investing the time today when we don't need it, right? It's kind of like a rainy day fund. You don't need the rainy day fund, after the emergency. You need it before the emergency so that you're able to take care of that. But we've put it at the top of our list. Relationships matter most. It's our number one core value because it doesn't matter the widget you're selling, the service you're providing. It doesn't matter about the institutions that you're involved in if you don't care about the people. So I just really want you to kind of listen through this as we talk deeper and longer about these long-term relationships.
It's a good word. One of the things that I've always struggled with when it comes to relationships is I think that I have to like be all in all the time. And I feel like I can only have a few. Do you think that? So that's what I have now. So I think back over the last 5 to 10 years,
Sure.
7 years, especially since I've been in a mastermind. Actually, I'm just going to say what it is. That's been the catalyst for me personally, being around aligned people that are kind of aligned in the same direction that I'm going. They're not exactly like me, but they have similar interests and challenges and successes and things. But my personality and your personality very different.
Sure.
And so like I tend to think, hey, if I've got three to maybe five, what I would call longer term close relationships. And I feel like right now I have three or four of those, um, maybe five, because I put the time in.
Mhm.
And I've had to learn not that it doesn't have to be every day. In my head, that's what I think. I don't know
Yeah.
why I think that.
Sure.
It's just, it's like, it's if you're intentional and especially as a person of faith, when the Holy Spirit, right, impresses it upon you to be friendly to those people in your that you want to build relationships with,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
follow through. But you're a little different. Like
Mm.
you have a lot of relationships.
Mhm.
Like your
Mhm.
personality is different in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I feed off that. A lot of people it exhaust, and you've even commented in the past, you need a minute to see it invigorates me, these conversations, and I think even on this podcast, I've talked about this. Like Robin goes, do you have to talk to everybody on the elevator? I mean, the table next to us at Jimmy Kelly's having dinner, do you have to talk to them about where they live and where they're from? And I'm like, man, that just invigorates me. And you laugh at me all the time because I leave the house really early. I go fishing 2 or 3 days a week. And oftentimes I'll leave at 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning to fish for 2 or 3 hours. And I'm thinking, who can I call at 4 and 5 in the morning? I'm like, oh, I know they're up because they're on Eastern time. Or, Jeremy Stritton lives in Australia. He's been up for 12 hours. I'll call Jeremy and talk to him. But it invigorates me, right? It does different things for different people. But regardless if it's my personality or your personality, what's important is that we invest in those relationships.
Right.
And one of the things that I think is important, and I've even taught this over time in the mastermind and in one on one coaching, is I teach people to call people and check on them when they don't need anything. And see, we quickly think of people when we want to borrow their chainsaw or we need a relationship introduction or we need whatever, you fill in the blank. But when you just call people, we'll use a couple of my close friends as an example because I've already mentioned them on this call, but Alan Lindsay, my buddy, 45 years. I'll call him every week or 10 days and he'll do me the same. And it's just, hey, Big A, what's up? Or hey, Alan, how you doing? How's Mitzi? Checking on the kids. But see, what happens invariably is that most of the time when we call people like that, the follow up question or the follow up statement is, hey, while I've
Mm,
got you, let me ask you a question. And I always go, now we're getting to why you called me.
mm,
But see, it leaves such an indelible impression when you don't ask the question. When you just call people and say, "Hey, man, had you on my mind. Wanted to check, see how Mitzi was feeling. How's Rudy doing? How the grandkids." And then when you don't ask the follow up question, they go, "They really cared about me." And I've just made it a habit of doing that over the course of my career. Is that people that I really care about intimately, not blowing smoke, not trying to get
mhm.
anything, not trying to get the reciprocity, but people that I'm really interested in and care about, I want to check on them. Right. And here's the funny part when you do need something, right? When you do need something, it's a lot easier to make that call. It's like, oh man, I hate to call him. I need to borrow his, whatever. And I hadn't talked to him in 3 months and I hate to call him now. And it's like, it's a natural thing. Like, hey man, can we do this or that? And you're like, yeah, not a problem. And so it just, plus it's enjoyable. Like, how refreshing is it when you get that call? When
Mhm.
somebody calls you and said, hey, Kevin, God really laid you on my heart this morning. I was thinking about you and Sonia and thinking about your girls and the grandkids. And man, I just want to catch up. You're like, golly, I'd give them a hug if they were here. Right. And so that's the way we're going to build these long term relationships.
Can I not challenge you, but my experience has been a little different. Um, I agree with you. Calling people without wanting or needing anything is great, and we should do that 100%. 100% we should do that. I also think this is my experience. I love it when people call me and need things.
Yeah, I'm cool with it, but
I
I'm
do.
saying
I
don't
totally
lie to them and tell them you're calling them to check on them when
for
you need to
sure.
borrow their chainsaw.
Yeah, but I'm just saying in relationships,
Right.
like if you have a relationship, right, with somebody, like even a not a long term, but a growing relationship, right? It's getting going. You've been in Tennessee recently. We started a new life group. Was it 9 months ago or something? And so we're getting to know other couples that we see them once a week and maybe do something every month or every other week with another couple, dinner or something, invite them in or go to their house, whatever. But I remember, I think it was about a month and a half ago that one of the couples called us and they're like, "Hey, would you guys help us out do this thing?" Si and I look at each other and we're like, "Wow, it actually kind of feels good to be needed."
Yeah, sure.
So in relationships, I agree with what you're saying. I'm just
Yeah,
saying on the other side of it too. I think you're right. It's easier to ask when we have relationships, and
right.
especially if we're not. That's the only ever reason that we call.
Right,
Yeah.
and you do that, it's like, "Man, dude, you only want me." Kevin, I'm so glad, though, that you feel that way. Now is a good time to spring it on you. Robin and I are gonna use your pool June 21st for our 43rd wedding anniversary, and when we leave, I wanna borrow your Mustang for the weekend. So, man, I am excited
Nice. You're
that
all
you
in,
feel that
man.
way. So, that is so cool. Thank you. So, I got
You're
an
all in.
audience now that is, witness to the fact that you said that. So, man, I was scared how I was gonna ask you, but there we go.
Oh, that's great, man.
There
I'll
we
have the
go.
keys. I'll have the keys hanging up at the pavilion. So
Hey, why do you think that a lot of guys today though are afraid to build relationships? What is some of the things that you feel is keeping guys from going there?
I can speak from experience a little bit on this one, and that's that I think I alluded it to it before a little bit. Is it takes time, and sometimes I don't want to take the time. I've got other things I want to do. I'm selfish. Sometimes I have a limiting belief that I don't think that other people want it as much as I do. That I matter as much to other people. That I have anything to offer them in terms of just being whatever.
Man, you're overthinking this. Like you're too much in your head on this, right? You can't weigh all those things out. You've got to be willing to give and support and nurture and figure that out along the way and then tweak, right? Then modify, then adapt your process. But man, don't go into those relationships making all those assumptions because you may be missing a real blessing and causing someone else to miss a real friendship.
I hear you. I hear you.
You know,
It's
one of the
just
things that I think that guys don't want to go into relationships with other guys is because they've been taken advantage of before. They like build this wall. They're like, no, man, I was taken advantage of, and there's no way I'm going back into another relationship because I'm not going to allow somebody to get that close to me. And so they build this wall. And I think they're missing so much by doing that. I think that we've got to be vulnerable. We've got to be transparent. We've got to be authentic. We've got to be a real friend first, right? For them in order to reciprocate with us in doing that. And are you going to get hurt? Absolutely. 100% you're going to get hurt. You know, there was a family member of mine that I really trusted. We'll call him Billy for the sake of this interview. He worked for me for years. He was a great guy. We fished together, we hunted together. I mean, this guy was a guy that I'd bet anything that this guy would be there to the end for me, right? And I found out later he was stealing my gun collection,
mm,
and I had no idea. This guy was a family member. Man, it destroyed me for a period of time. I mean, like people were telling me you need to have him arrested. And I was like, God, I can't do that. I can't have this guy arrested. And it really jaded me for a period of time. I had to really work through that because I was like, man, this is a family member and I trusted him implicitly and I allowed him to get close enough to me to be stealing my guns and selling them. I found one of my guns for sale on a marketplace and it was a really rare gun. And I went to check on my guns and it was gone. And he had it listed for sale. And I was like, see, that's what happens to us all the time. People, um, They're going to make mistakes. They're going to mess up, but we can't deprive ourselves of intimate relationships because we've been hurt in the past, right? We just can't do that. So, yeah, look over those things and be wise, right? Don't go into it blind, be wise, but really think, do I want to live my life in a manner where I'm distrusting forever and ever? Amen, right? Or can
Mhm.
I allow myself to be vulnerable and even be hurt for the sake of being a good friend to other people and possibly finding a real gem at the end? And so I just want to encourage you as you go forward. Uh, I'll just end this part of this interview with saying that it's a horrible way to live to say, I'll never trust again. So I just want to encourage you today to really think through that. What about building new relationships? How have you gone about it in building new relationships?
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit earlier, the past 5 or 10 years has been a game changer for me, and, a lot of that had to do with, um, putting myself in an environment, again, where people were more aligned with me, the way I thought, the way I did life, the entrepreneurial lifestyle, and so I think putting myself in that environment helped me overcome some of those things that I had mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
right? What did I have to offer? All that kind of stuff. Like all those. But what I meant by when I said that was, I'll give you an example. I'm not a sports guy other than NASCAR. I like NASCAR. Most people don't even follow NASCAR or know what it is, right? But I like it. And I don't like it because they go in ovals. I like the technology behind it. I like the pit crew. I like uh, just the strategy behind it all, right? That's what I like. Anyway, but almost everybody, say in Michigan, for instance, where I spent most of my adult years, it's a big football state.
Right.
And when I moved there, I was basically, if you're a Michigan or Michigan State fan, one's blue, one's green. My in-laws were green. I didn't like green, so I chose blue. That literally was my decision making prowess of which football team to pick. Never watched it. Don't watch football. Don't watch basketball or baseball or golf or any of that kind of stuff. So the reality for me is whenever we went to spend time with other guys in a social setting of any kind, what they talk about.
Football.
Yeah, I have nothing to offer there. So
Mm.
that's kind of what I was saying. Is like
Sure, sure.
I just. It's not that I overthought it. Really, it's just that
Right,
it just you can't participate because you have no common
right.
ground.
Yeah,
And it's not that there weren't other things. We had families and whatnot, but the last few years, I found myself in a place where I've got people around me that some of them still love sports, which is great, but
yeah,
that's not all that they talk about.
yeah.
And
Sure.
so it's much easier, I found, to relate to people when you have some common ground.
Yeah.
And so putting myself in that space has been just, I think God provided an avenue there
Mm.
to make that a lot easier for me. I love encouraging people and giving back to people. I think it's fun. Um, I do. I love finding ways that you can surprise people, even if it's with a quick text,
Mm.
right? Something they're not thinking about. And yeah, I like pouring into people. And I think the more you pour into people, you said it already, the more that you pour into people,
Mm.
the more that you're there for people. Um, and sometimes being there isn't talking. Sometimes being there is just being quiet and
Yeah,
listening.
yeah.
And I think those are some of the things that have helped me build relationships where I didn't have them
Right.
in the past.
Wally, I want to go in full blown teaching mode just for a second because you said something that really piqued my interest that we talk a lot about in Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind is that edifying, building up people before they ask for it. And the other day, there was Ron Maston owns a lawn care business here in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and he's been taking care of my yard for about 10 years. And one of his guys was in my front yard the other day, and I went outside and took a picture on his hands and knees, and he was getting this little bitty pieces of grass out of our mulch. And going way above and beyond, right? What he should have done, and striped my yard just perfect. I mean, it was beautiful. And I came inside and I shot a little video and then took a picture of him and sent both of them to Ron and said, "Hey, man, your customer service is off the chart. I want to thank you for this." And it further endeared our relationship because I was lifting him up. I wasn't complaining about something they weren't doing. I was telling him something good they were doing, right? And we make a practice of that. We're always looking for opportunities to build the relationship fundamentally based on edifying and encouraging. Because if you're that guy that always complains when it's cold, you're always upset when it's too hot, they didn't pick enough grass out, they never striped the yard right, you're not building a relationship. But man, when you give that to people and they weren't expecting it, I'm telling you, it takes your relationship to the next level. So always, always, always be looking for opportunities, as Wally just said, to encourage and lift people up. Some other things that I think is pretty cool to build relationships is I love to go to these networking events and conferences. Always attend Podfest. We go to Podcast Movement. We go to Michael Stelzner's Social Media Marketing World. The people that I've met there are some of my best and dearest friends online now, not folks in person, but people that have joined our mastermind group. They've been in our coaching program. They've come to our live event. Just amazing people. And you find these people at these places like the networking events and conferences and even industry specific things that you can do in the industry that you're in because you're meeting like-minded people, right? Just like you. And so we can really find people there. It's all kind of clubs you can join. Listen, church. Like I love to meet people at church. We go to a big church. You and I both go to the same church. It's 7,000-8,000 members there. There's so many people that you can align with and find common ground with.
There's something that Sonia and I do, not every week. It's probably maybe once a month. Um, it's just us now, right? I don't have kids. Not that that changes anything. With kids, it'd probably be fun as well. But on Sundays after church, we'll usually hit the early morning service. And then we have this restaurant here in this area called First Watch. And it's like a breakfast lunch place. They're not even open for dinner, I don't think. They close in the afternoons or whatever. But they have some interesting, fun kind of food. And one of the things they have there is called a community table. And of course, you can go in and still get seated normally,
Sure.
right? But they have this community table and it seats 10 people. And probably 90% of the time it's open. Sometimes they reserve it for big parties, but most of the time it's open. And most people don't know about it. And so you walk up and you say, "Hey, here there's two of us." Like, "Yeah, it's going to be 20 minutes." And I say, "Hey, are those two spots at the community table open?" "Yeah, yeah, go on and sit down." And you just walk over and you sit down by people that you don't know from Adam. And that's not necessarily long-term relationships. I
No, but
haven't
you never
done
know.
those yet, but you start somewhere. And I've met people from church at the community table at First Watch. That they're
Isn't
doing
that
the same
cool?
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing the same thing. It was great.
I had a guy come there not to the community table at that same restaurant and asked me if he could sit down with Robin and I and have coffee. And I'm like, okay, come on. This is not
Let's
the
go.
community table. But listen, I'm just going to tell you straight up, like if I come to that table with you, you're not sharing my pancakes. Like I'm just telling you, they got the best pancakes. You're not getting, hey, what are some ways that we can invest in these long-term relationships? What are some ways that you see that it's worth the effort, it's worth the time?
I think it's one of the things I think is the opposite of maybe something we mentioned a little earlier related to what are guys afraid of. And I think it's just kind of the opposite of that. We may be afraid of um, being vulnerable, but a reason to invest in long-term relationships is so that you have a place to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You have a place to be transparent. I mean, where else?
You can't.
I just
No,
want
you can't
anybody.
do it.
You email me right now and you pod at viewfromthetop.com. You email us and you tell us, where do you have right now that
Right.
you can be 100% vulnerable and transparent?
You can't do it if you don't have these long-term relationships. Like
I
who
agree
would
with
I
you.
wouldn't even want to hear it from somebody else personally. Walk up to me and tell me all your trials and troubles, and it's like, dude, I don't even know who you are. Like, what are you even about?
Right.
But man, when
Right.
I know you, you come to me and you and I have had some really deep discussions. Like, man, I'm
Mm,
hurting right now. Like, I'm struggling. Like, I don't know what to do in this situation. And I'm like, okay, man, lay it out. What is it? And we can talk through it because there again, I've got the relationship, I've got context in it. We
mhm,
need that safe space for honest feedback. And the other thing that people don't want in the relationship is constructive criticism. Some people can't take it. Some people you offend and they're like, not me. Like I send out letters to people I know and say, hey, how do you see me doing this and that? I want to know, like, give it to me. Like, I may be a little bit unusual. Everybody's as bold and forward as I am, but like, I don't want to go through life not living life to its fullest. I don't want to
mm,
kick it neutral. I want the best. I don't mean I got to have the best materially, but the best I know how. The best that I can do is like, man, if I'm not treating Robin right or my kids or my grandkids or you as a colleague, I want to know how I can do that better. And the only way I can do that is if I'm willing to subject myself to the scrutiny of other people that have context in my life and can help me go to the next level. And so, man, I implore the listeners today, think through it, do an evaluation of your life. Who are those people that you could go do that with?
so talking about long-term relationships, you and I we've known each other for what, 7, 8 years now. The past few years, we've gotten much closer
Sure.
for multiple reasons.
That's how come I'm borrowing your Mustang.
Full transparency, before we get on this, I started recording this podcast today. Uh, Big A shows up. We're doing some pre-call stuff and talking about some podcast stuff, and Big A, we showed up on this pre-call, and basically, I was trying to show him something, and he's like, "Look, man, I just don't. I'm not in the right space for this, for good reason. Like, he had good
Sure.
reason. I'm not in the headspace right now for this, and then right. But what he didn't know is that I, on the other side, have just had a terrible day myself with like people not getting it and just like making me do extra work that I don't want to do for apparently no reason. And so we had this, we were both honest. He said, look, he stopped me. He's like, look, today's not the day for this. And inside of me, man, I was fired up for like 5 seconds. And I'm like, then I was honest. I was like, hey, you know what? I've had a rough day too on this
Yeah.
side. So we're good. Let's just drop it and move
Sure.
on. If we didn't have a relationship,
Couldn't do that.
woo, that'd have been ugly.
Yeah, I know. It's like you know what's so cool is like we're at the end of this interview and we're fine. Like I hadn't given it another
Mm,
thought, and I would assume you haven't either. That's
yeah.
what's cool because you overlook people that you love in situations that they're dealing with hard times, right? And when you don't have that long term relationship, you could never in a million years say that to somebody else. In the freedom that you're allowed to be yourself and to say, I'm having a hard day and this is not a good time and this is not working. And it's like, hey man, I hear you, I feel you, and let's go forward. Listen, that is the reason I want all of you today to do an evaluation of your own life. Just really think through who are the people that I can do that with? Who are the people that I can share with intimately? Who are the people that we can have a knockdown, drag out fight with, and 5 minutes later we can go to lunch together? Like, who are those people in your life? Listen, there's some resources out there we want to tell you about also. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that should be mandatory reading before you graduate from high school. Dale Carnegie's course is amazing. His book, How to Win Friends, Influence People. Yeah, reach out. There's podcasts out there too. Our friend Jordan Harbinger, he's got a great podcast. Tim Ferriss, check out his show. There's some TED Talks out there too that you can listen to. Brene Brown, we promote a lot of her stuff. Some of the stuff she says I don't necessarily agree with, but the power of vulnerability is really good. So if you're looking for some resources to really sharpen your axe in relationships and figure out better ways to build the relationships, find the right people, really dial into that, those are a few things. Hopefully it will help you. Hey, well, I hope you've enjoyed the show today. You can tell I'm pretty amped up about relationships because relationships matter most, man. As we dove in talking about the particulars that you can do to hone your skills in developing those new relationships, I just hope that you go out there today and think through who the people are that you've got that you can really confide in, that you can be vulnerable and transparent with. Who are those people you can call at 2 a.m. in the morning to help come rescue you, metaphorically speaking? I want you to think through that so that you have that life that you've always wanted to live, so that you can have that view from the top.
Thanks a lot for listening in today. If you are new here, be sure to look back through our previous episodes for topics that you might need help with. Maybe you need a little inspiration, or maybe you need some motivation to get your rear in gear. You can do that on your favorite listening platform, or you can just go to viewfromthetop.com/podcast to discover more. And we'll see you next time.